Pay attention to this video. Before the investigation began, before interviews were conducted, and before one overlooked detail would later shift the entire understanding of this case, there was only this recording. September 18th, 2024, 10:42 p.m., Columbus, Eastmoor neighborhood. A fixed residential security camera mounted above a two-car garage. The footage is time-stamped in the lower right corner. The lens faces a short concrete driveway, a closed garage door, and a portion of the sidewalk. A single porch light is on. No audio. 10:42:11 p.m. A silver SUV enters frame from the left. Headlights sweep across the driveway and briefly wash out the image. The vehicle pulls in slowly, aligning slightly off-center. The engine remains running. 10:42:18 p.m. The driver's side door opens. A man steps out. He is wearing dark jeans, white sneakers, and a gray hooded sweatshirt. His name is Daniel Harper. He closes the door without slamming it. He does not immediately move toward the house. 10:42:23 p.m. He stands beside the vehicle. His shoulders are slightly forward. His right hand rests on the roof of the SUV. His head turns toward the street, then back toward the house. There are no other people visible. 10:42:31 p.m. He removes his phone from his pocket. The screen illuminates his face faintly. He looks down for approximately 5 seconds. His thumb moves once across the screen. 10:42:37 p.m. He locks the vehicle. The headlights blink twice. The engine shuts off. The street returns to its previous level of dim lighting. 10:41:41 p.m. Daniel walks toward the garage door instead of the front entrance. His pace is steady. He does not appear to be carrying anything. 10:44:45 p.m. He pauses directly in front of the garage keypad mounted on the exterior wall. His body blocks the camera's view of the numbers. His right arm lifts. His finger presses a sequence. There is a 2-second delay. 10:48:48 p.m. The garage door begins to rise. It opens smoothly, without hesitation. Interior lights are already on inside the garage. 10:42:52 p.m. Daniel steps halfway inside. He stops. He turns his head back toward the street again. He remains still for 3 seconds. 10:42:55 p.m. A sedan drives past in the background. It does not slow down. 10:42:59 p.m. Daniel enters the garage fully. Only the back of his sweatshirt and his left shoe remain visible for a moment. 10:43:02 p.m. The garage door begins closing. 10:43:08 p.m. The door seals shut. The driveway is empty. For the next 4 minutes, nothing changes. The porch light remains on. No additional movement appears in frame. No one exits the home. No vehicles arrive. At 10:47:19 p.m., the interior garage light turns off. The camera does not capture who switched it off. Daniel Harper is not seen leaving the residence. There is no footage of him returning to his vehicle. There is no sign of struggle, no visible disturbance. This is the last time Daniel Harper is seen alive. 17 days later, on October 5, 2024, a call is placed to the Columbus Division of Police at 6:14 a.m. The caller does not identify himself. He speaks for less than 30 seconds. He says there is something officers need to see inside the detached garage at 814 Rose Hill Avenue in the Eastmoor neighborhood of Columbus. He does not explain further. The call disconnects before dispatch can request a name. At that point, Daniel Harper has already been reported missing for 11 days. The initial missing persons report was filed on September 24th by his younger sister. She told officers that Daniel had stopped answering calls and messages. That was unusual, she said. He was consistent, predictable. He responded, even if briefly. When patrol officers first conducted a welfare check at his home on September 25th, there were no visible signs of forced entry. The SUV was still parked in the driveway. The mailbox contained 3 days of mail. The front door was locked. The garage door was closed. Through a window, officers observed nothing obviously disturbed inside the residence. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, no visible blood. They documented the visit and left after receiving no legal grounds to enter without a warrant. At the time, Daniel was treated as a routine missing adult case. He was 38 years old, employed, no known medical issues, no active restraining orders, no immediate history of violence reported in the initial intake. His phone last pinged near his home at 10:43 p.m. on September 18, the same time captured on the security footage. After the anonymous call on October 5th, officers returned to the property. By 7:02 a.m., a supervisor authorizes forced entry into the garage. The exterior shows no signs of tampering. The keypad is intact. The door mechanism appears functional. When officers lift the garage door manually, they notice an odor before they see anything else. The space is dim. The interior light is off. Daniel's SUV remains parked where it was on September 18. The driver's side door is closed. The vehicle appears undisturbed. Then officers observe something positioned behind the vehicle, partially concealed by stacked storage bins. Daniel Harper is located inside his own garage. He is unresponsive. There are no obvious signs of a struggle in the immediate area, no shattered objects, no visible defensive damage to the walls. The scene is secured. Crime scene unit is notified. By 8:11 a.m., yellow tape surrounds the property. Neighbors begin to gather at a distance. Several report they had not seen Daniel in days. One neighbor states she assumed he was traveling for work. Another recalls hearing a vehicle start late at night, sometime during the previous week, but she cannot provide an exact date. Investigators review the security footage from September 18 again, the same recording that captured Daniel entering the garage at 10:42 p.m. At first glance, it appears straightforward. A man arrives home. He enters his garage. He is never seen again. But the timeline begins to tighten. Daniel's phone shows no outgoing activity after 10:41 p.m. on September 18. No calls, no texts, no app usage. Bank accounts show no transactions. His employer confirms he did not report to work on September 19 and did not call in sick. Yet the utility usage data, later obtained by detectives, was switched on and off multiple times between September 19 and September 22. That detail is not made public. The medical examiner's office does not immediately release a cause of death. Toxicology is pending. Detectives refrain from labeling the case a homicide. At a press briefing on October 6th, a spokesperson for the Columbus Division of Police states only that the investigation remains active and that they are reviewing all available evidence, including neighborhood surveillance. No mention is made of the anonymous caller. No mention is made of the garage interior beyond confirmation of Daniel's death. And no mention is made of what investigators would later notice when they adjusted the contrast and angle of the original September 18 security footage, a change that would challenge the assumption that Daniel Harper was the victim in this story. For now, publicly, he remains exactly that. A man who went home, a man who never came back out, a man found in his own garage 17 days later. Before September 18, 2024, Daniel Harper's life followed a consistent pattern. He was 38 years old, born and raised in Columbus. After graduating from Ohio State University with a degree in logistics management, he remained in the city,
eventually working as a regional operations coordinator for a mid-sized freight distribution company. His schedule was structured, Monday through Friday, occasional late calls with warehouse supervisors in neighboring states, predictable hours, predictable routines. He purchased the Rose Hill Avenue property in 2019, a two-bedroom home with a detached garage and a narrow backyard. Mortgage payments were automatic. Utilities were consistently paid on time. Neighbors described him as quiet but not unfriendly. Daniel's mornings were methodical. Security footage from neighboring homes often captured him leaving at 7:12 a.m., give or take a minute. Coffee in a stainless steel travel mug, laptop bag over his right shoulder. He reversed out of the driveway slowly, always checking both directions before turning onto the street. He maintained his yard himself. Saturday mornings he mowed the lawn in straight lines. He edged the sidewalk. In autumn, he bagged leaves immediately after they fell, instead of letting them accumulate. Inside the house, friends later told investigators, everything had a place. The kitchen counters were clear except for a coffee machine and a fruit bowl. Shoes were aligned near the entryway. The thermostat was set to 72 degrees year-round. He had been married once. The divorce was finalized in 2021. No children. According to court records, the separation was described as amicable. Assets were divided without litigation. Daniel kept the house. His ex-wife relocated to another state. Since then, his social circle had narrowed. He saw his younger sister twice a month for dinner, usually at a chain restaurant near Easton Town Center. The receipts show a pattern, alternating who paid the bill. They spoke regularly, though briefly. Most calls lasted under 4 minutes. At work, colleagues described him as dependable. He did not volunteer personal details. He completed tasks on time. He left meetings promptly once they ended. He exercised 3 evenings a week at a nearby gym. Entry logs confirmed consistent attendance between 6:03 p.m. and 7:11 p.m. He did not linger afterward. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, nothing outwardly dramatic occurred. However, small deviations began appearing in routine data. On September 3rd, Daniel canceled his gym membership. No explanation was provided. On September 6th, he changed the access code to his garage keypad. The manufacturer's digital log shows a reset at 8:14 p.m. The previous code had been active for over 3 years. On September 10th, he withdrew $4,000 in cash from his primary checking account. Bank records indicate the transaction was conducted in person at a branch less than 2 miles from his home. Surveillance confirms it was Daniel. He placed the envelope in his jacket pocket and left alone. There is no corresponding deposit elsewhere. His sister later told detectives that during their last dinner on September 14th, Daniel seemed distracted. He checked his phone twice during the meal, which she said was unusual. When she asked if everything was fine, he responded, "Just work stuff." He did not elaborate. Phone records show multiple short calls that week to a number saved only as R. Each call lasted under 90 seconds. Most occurred late in the evening, between 9:30 and 10:15 p.m. Investigators later determined the number belonged to Rebecca Lynn, a 34-year-old independent financial consultant based in Columbus. Daniel had met Rebecca earlier that summer at a networking event. According to calendar entries recovered from his email, they had coffee twice in July and once in August. There were no photographs of them together on social media, no public acknowledgement of a relationship. Rebecca told investigators they were casually seeing each other. She described Daniel as reserved. She stated he was considering a business opportunity and had asked for advice regarding short-term capital. The $4,000 cash withdrawal occurred 4 days after their last confirmed meeting. On September 17th, 1 day before the security footage captured Daniel entering his garage for the final time, his phone activity increased slightly. 3 outgoing calls to Rebecca, 2 unanswered, one lasting 42 seconds at 9:58 p.m. At 10:36 p.m., he sent a single text, "I'm home, we need to talk tomorrow." There was no response recorded. Neighbors reported nothing unusual that evening. No raised voices, no visible visitors at the front door, no deliveries. To the outside world, Daniel Harper remained what he had always appeared to be: organized, quiet, structured. A man with a steady job, a maintained home, a routine that left little room for unpredictability. But by mid-September, patterns were shifting in small, measurable ways. The gym visits stopped, the garage code changed, cash was withdrawn, late-night calls increased. Individually, none of these actions suggested imminent danger. Together, they form a timeline that narrows toward September 18th, toward 10:42 p.m., toward a sequence of events that would later challenge the assumption that Daniel Harper was simply the victim in this case.
When detectives began reviewing Daniel Harper's financial records in detail, the name Rebecca Lynn surfaced repeatedly. Rebecca Lynn, 34, operated as an independent financial consultant in Columbus. Her business was registered 2 years earlier. Public records show no prior criminal history, no bankruptcies, no active civil judgments. On paper, her profile appeared stable. She lived in a condominium approximately 14 minutes from Daniel's residence. Building access logs confirmed Daniel's vehicle entered the underground parking garage on 3 occasions between July and early September. Each visit lasted under 2 hours. Rebecca told investigators their relationship was informal. She said they met at a professional networking mixer in June. According to her statement, Daniel approached her first. They exchanged contact information. He later contacted her to discuss investment strategy. Detectives confirmed Daniel had attended the event. Photographs from the venue show him in the background of several group shots. Rebecca appears in separate frames speaking with other attendees. There are no images of them together. Text message records show their communication was brief and efficient. Few emojis, no extended personal exchanges. Most messages referenced scheduling or financial topics. Phrases such as short-term liquidity, risk tolerance, and private placement opportunity appear multiple times. On August 28th, Daniel transferred $12,500 electronically to an account registered under Rebecca's consulting business. The memo line reads, "Initial tranche." 2 weeks later, on September 10th, he withdrew $4,000 in cash. When questioned about the transfer, Rebecca stated it was part of a private investment opportunity involving commercial property redevelopment. She claimed Daniel requested discretion. She said the cash withdrawal was unrelated to her. Detectives asked for documentation regarding the investment. Rebecca provided a 3-page summary outlining projected returns, timelines, and risk factors. The document contained formatting inconsistencies. Metadata later showed it was created on September 22, 4 days after Daniel was last seen on the security footage. When asked about the document's creation date, Rebecca responded she reformatted the file after Daniel's disappearance to make it clearer for investigators. There were no signed contracts between them, no notarized agreements, no evidence of property acquisition under Daniel's name. Beyond finances, subtle patterns began to surface. Daniel changed his garage keypad code on September 6th. Phone extraction reports indicate that on September 7th, he saved a note in his device titled "Code Only for Me." The note was deleted on September 18th at 9:12 p.m., approximately 90 minutes before the security footage recorded his return home. Rebecca's phone records show she was within a 2-mile radius of Daniel's house on the evening of September 18th. Cell tower pings place her device moving along East Main Street at 10:34 p.m.
She told detectives she was driving home from meeting a client and denied stopping near Daniel's property. Traffic cameras confirm her vehicle passed through an intersection 3 blocks from Rose Hill Avenue at 10:34 p.m. What remains unclear is whether she continued driving or turned into the residential streets where Daniel lived. Neighbors did not report seeing her vehicle. No doorbell cameras captured a clear image of her car on Rose Hill Avenue that night. However, investigators noted that Daniel's SUV, visible in the September 18th security footage, is parked slightly off-center in the driveway, closer to the garage entrance than usual. Prior footage from previous weeks shows him typically aligning the vehicle more centrally. It is a small deviation. Detectives also observed Daniel pausing at the garage entrance and turning his head toward the street before stepping inside. That pause lasts approximately 3 seconds. At first glance, it appears incidental. Rebecca stated she last spoke to Daniel at 9:58 p.m. on September 17th. She claimed the call was brief and routine. She said they had tentative plans to meet later in the week to finalize paperwork. When asked about the text Daniel sent at 10:36 p.m. on September 17th, "I'm home, we need to talk tomorrow," Rebecca told investigators she never saw it. Phone records confirm the message was delivered, but not opened. Financially, Rebecca's business account showed limited activity prior to Daniel's transfer. After August 28th, several withdrawals occurred in rapid succession. By September 19th, the majority of the transferred funds had been dispersed into 2 separate accounts not directly tied to her consulting business. She described these as project partners. She declined to provide names without legal counsel present. At this stage, detectives did not charge Rebecca with any crime. There was no direct evidence linking her to Daniel's death, no surveillance footage placing her physically at his home, no eyewitness accounts. But the overlap between Daniel's financial decisions and his disappearance created tension in the timeline. Money had moved. Codes had changed. Documents had been created after he was no longer alive to verify them. Publicly, Daniel Harper was still regarded as the victim, a man possibly taken advantage of financially before an unexplained death inside his own garage. Privately, investigators began asking a different question. If Daniel was preparing for something, changing codes, withdrawing cash, sending late-night messages, what exactly was he anticipating? And who else knew about it?
The final week of Daniel Harper's life does not begin with a visible crisis. It begins with routine. Monday, September 16, 2024. At 7:12 a.m., Daniel's SUV backs out of the driveway, consistent with prior mornings. A neighboring camera captures the headlights turning east toward Main Street. He arrives at work at 7:39 a.m., badge access logs confirm. He leaves at 5:18 p.m. No irregularities are noted by colleagues. At 6:02 p.m., his phone connects to the gym's Wi-Fi network for the first time in nearly 2 weeks. He does not check in at the front desk. The connection lasts 4 minutes. There is no record of him entering the workout area. At 6:07 p.m., the phone disconnects and travels back toward his home. At 8:44 p.m., he places a 73-second call to Rebecca Lynn. The content is unknown. At 9:03 p.m., he opens his banking app. He reviews recent transactions. There are no transfers initiated that evening. Tuesday, September 17. Daniel works a full day. Surveillance from the parking lot shows him sitting in his vehicle for 6 minutes after clocking out. He appears to be looking down on his phone. No one approaches the car. At 9:58 p.m., he calls Rebecca. The call lasts 42 seconds. Immediately after, at 10:36 p.m., he sends the text, "I'm home. We need to talk tomorrow." There is no reply. Wednesday, September 18. The day begins normally.
badge access at 7:41 a.m., coffee purchase at 8:03 a.m., email correspondence with a warehouse manager at 11:17 a.m. He attends a 2 p.m. logistics meeting. Minute notes show he contributed briefly regarding shipping delays. At 5:52 p.m., Daniel leaves work earlier than usual. His supervisor later states he mentioned having something to handle. At 5:21 p.m., he stops at a hardware store 3 miles from his home. Receipt records show the purchase of 2 heavy-duty plastic storage bins, a roll of contractor-grade trash bags, and a new padlock. Total, $86.43. Surveillance confirms he checked out alone. At 6:03 p.m., his phone connects to his home Wi-Fi network. Between 6:11 p.m. and 7:42 p.m., there is no outgoing phone activity. However, his laptop logs show a search history that evening: revocable trust structure, personal liability in private investment, and how to recover wired funds. At 8:09 p.m., he receives a call from a number later identified as belonging to a prepaid device. The call lasts 18 seconds. There is no voicemail. Investigators are unable to identify the purchaser of the prepaid phone. At 8:47 p.m., Daniel's home security system records the garage door opening briefly and closing again within 90 seconds. No vehicle exits. The interior light remains on for 13 minutes afterward. At 9:12 p.m., the note titled "Code Only for Me" is deleted from his phone. At 9:26 p.m., a neighbor's doorbell camera captures a sedan slowing at the corner of Rose Hill Avenue and Elmwood Drive. The footage is grainy. The vehicle does not fully enter the frame. It continues past the intersection. At 9:41 p.m., Daniel's phone disconnects from home Wi-Fi and switches to cellular data, even though the device remains inside the house. This typically indicates the Wi-Fi connection was manually disabled or temporarily interrupted. At 10:31 p.m., Rebecca Lynn's phone pings a tower 2 miles from Daniel's home. At 10:42 p.m., the garage-mounted security camera records Daniel pulling into the driveway. He exits the SUV. He pauses. He looks toward the street. He enters the garage. At 10:43 p.m., the garage door closes. Between 10:43 p.m. and 10:47 p.m., the interior garage light remains on. Then it switches off. Daniel's phone activity stops at 10:41 p.m., 2 minutes before he is seen on camera. No calls, no messages, no app usage. At 10:31 p.m., Rebecca Lynn's phone pings a tower 2 miles from Daniel's home. What investigators later focused on was not a single dramatic act, but a sequence of small decisions: the purchase of storage bins and contractor bags, the deletion of the garage code note, the brief prepaid phone call, the garage door opening earlier that evening without a vehicle leaving, the Wi-Fi disconnection inside the house. Each action, isolated, can be explained. Together, they compress the timeline. When forensic technicians processed the garage after Daniel's body was discovered, they noted the 2 newly purchased storage bins positioned behind the SUV. One was empty. The other contained items removed from Daniel's home office: shredded paper fragments, an external hard drive, and printed bank statements. The new padlock purchased at the hardware store was found locked onto a small interior cabinet mounted against the garage wall. Inside that cabinet were copies of the same financial documents connected to Rebecca's business account. No forced entry marks were found anywhere on the property. No evidence suggested someone broke in. If another person entered that garage on September 18th, they either had access or were let in. And if Daniel anticipated a confrontation that night, his actions earlier that day suggest preparation. What remains uncertain is whether he believed he was protecting himself or protecting something else. When the autopsy results were finalized on October 21, The cause of death was listed as blunt force trauma to the back of the head, followed by compressive asphyxia. There were no defensive wounds on Daniel Harper's hands, no fractures in his forearms, no signs of prolonged struggle inside the garage. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 10:45 p.m. and 11:15 p.m. on September 18, a window that begins less than 3 minutes after the garage door closed. Initially, investigators believed Daniel had been attacked, but several details did not align with that assumption. First, there was no sign of forced entry. Second, there was no evidence that anyone exited the garage after 10:43 p.m. And third, when digital forensics enhanced the original security footage from the garage-mounted camera, something changed. The camera had been installed at a slight downward angle, capturing most of the driveway, but only a narrow portion of the garage interior when the door opened. In the original viewing, nothing unusual was visible. Weeks later, technicians adjusted the brightness and cropped the lower left corner of the frame during the moment the garage door was rising at 10:42:48 p.m. For approximately 1 second, a partial reflection appears in the rear passenger side window of Daniel's SUV. It is not another person. It is Daniel. But he is not alone. Behind him, already inside the garage before he steps in, a second figure is visible for less than half a second, standing near the interior wall, partially obscured by shelving. The angle is distorted. The shape is faint. However, the clothing matches Daniel's gray hooded sweatshirt. Frame-by-frame analysis shows that the second figure's posture mirrors his own movements with a slight delay, a fraction of a second. Investigators initially theorized the reflection was a visual artifact, but then they examined the timeline again. At 8:47 p.m., the garage door had opened briefly and closed. No vehicle exited. Interior light remained for 13 minutes. When forensic teams processed the garage, they found no fingerprints other than Daniel's on the keypad, interior door handle, and shelving units. But they also discovered something else. Under ultraviolet light, faint wipe patterns were visible on the concrete floor behind the SUV. Not signs of a struggle, but signs of cleaning. A thin, irregular streak extending approximately 4 feet. The blood spatter pattern did not match an ambush from behind. It matched a strike delivered while Daniel was facing the open garage door, meaning the person who struck him was positioned outside or near the threshold as he entered. Yet no one is seen entering behind him in the footage. That is when investigators returned to Daniel's phone extraction data. At 10:39 p.m., 2 minutes before his recorded activity stopped, the front-facing camera on his phone activated for 1.2 seconds. No photograph was saved. However, the system cache retained a corrupted thumbnail image. The image was reconstructed. It shows Daniel standing in his driveway, and in the background, reflected faintly in the glass of his SUV, someone standing behind him. Not inside the garage, not on the sidewalk, but directly behind him, outside the camera's main field of view. The angle explains why the security camera never captured the approach. The person was positioned in the blind spot created by the SUV's body and the camera's mounting height. Further analysis of cell tower data narrowed the prepaid phone call at 8:09 p.m. to a disposable device that connected briefly to a tower less than 600 feet from Daniel's house. The device was never used again after September 18. Then came the twist. Rebecca Lynn was not the financial consultant Daniel believed her to be. Records obtained through subpoena revealed her legal name was not Rebecca Lynn. It was Rebecca Morales, and she had previously been involved in 2 civil disputes in neighboring counties, both cases involving short-term private investment proposals that collapsed after funds were transferred. In each instance, no criminal charges were filed.
The disputes were settled quietly. Daniel had discovered this. The shredded documents found in the storage bin included printed court filings with the name Morales highlighted. The external hard drive contained downloaded copies of those same civil case records. On September 18, Daniel was not preparing to invest more money. He was preparing to confront her. Investigators now believe Rebecca arrived at the property before Daniel pulled into the driveway. She entered the garage earlier that evening, either using a copied keypad code or after Daniel temporarily opened the door at 8:47 p.m. When Daniel returned home at 10:42 p.m., she was already inside. The brief reflection captured in the SUV window was not a glitch. It was her silhouette, standing just out of frame, waiting in the angle the camera could not see. The strike occurred within moments of the garage door beginning to close. The wipe marks on the concrete were consistent with an attempt to clean a narrow area before repositioning the body behind the SUV. Rebecca's phone connecting to her condominium Wi-Fi at 11:08 p.m. places her home within the estimated time of death window, but the drive from Rose Hill Avenue to her residence takes approximately 14 minutes. If she left at 10:52 p.m., she would have arrived at 11:06 p.m. The timeline fits. The assumption that Daniel was simply a victim of unknown violence shifted because the camera angle had changed, and for less than a second, it showed that he was not alone.
After the reconstructed reflection and the recovered thumbnail image were presented to detectives, the direction of the case changed from unexplained death to targeted homicide. The Columbus Division of Police assembled a digital forensics task group to reprocess every second of available footage from September 18th, not just from Daniel Harper's property, but from surrounding homes within a 3-block radius in Columbus. Most of the neighborhood cameras faced outward toward streets and sidewalks. Very few captured driveways in full. Even fewer had overlapping angles. But one doorbell camera on Elmwood Drive recorded something previously dismissed as irrelevant. At 10:27 p.m., a dark sedan turned off East Main Street and slowed briefly before continuing toward Rose Hill Avenue. The vehicle's headlights dimmed momentarily, as if the driver had manually adjusted them or switched to parking lights. The car did not trigger motion alerts on Daniel's camera because it never passed directly in front of his house. Traffic analytics software enhanced the plate region, but glare obscured the numbers. However, investigators identified the vehicle's make and model, a 2016 black Toyota Corolla. Rebecca Morales owned a 2016 black Toyota Corolla. When detectives obtained a search warrant for her vehicle on October 23rd, luminol testing inside the trunk revealed faint reactive traces along the interior lining. The patterns were small and irregular. No visible stains were apparent to the naked eye. Laboratory analysis later confirmed the presence of Daniel Harper's blood. Rebecca was brought in for formal questioning the following day. During the recorded interview, she maintained that she had not been at Daniel's residence on September 18th. She stated she had been home by 10:45 p.m. Phone data contradicted that timeline by approximately 20 minutes. When confronted with the enhanced reflection from the security footage, she said it was inconclusive. When shown the reconstructed thumbnail image from Daniel's phone, she remained silent for nearly 11 seconds before asking for an attorney. Investigators then executed a search warrant on her condominium. Inside a hallway closet, they located a pair of gray cotton gloves with faint discoloration along the knuckle seams. DNA testing revealed a mixture profile, primarily Rebecca's, with trace amounts consistent with Daniel. On her laptop, forensic examiners recovered deleted browsing history from September 12th through September 18th. Among the searches, can security cameras see inside garages? Removing metadata from PDF files. How long does concrete hold blood trace?
More significantly, they uncovered a draft email dated September 18th at 7:14 p.m. The message was addressed to Daniel but never sent. It read, in part, "We need to keep this private. You're overreacting. If you go to the police, it hurts both of us." The draft was deleted at 10:02 p.m. that same night. Investigators believe Daniel confronted Rebecca earlier in the evening by phone after discovering her prior civil disputes under the name Morales. The prepaid phone call at 8:09 p.m. is believed to have been made by Rebecca using a disposable device, possibly to avoid creating a record tied to her primary number. The garage door opening at 8:47 p.m. likely corresponds to her entry into the space. What police initially missed was not a hidden camera or a dramatic clue. It was the angle. The garage-mounted camera had a fixed lens with limited dynamic range. The metallic surface created layered reflections that were not visible without digital enhancement. In the original resolution, the silhouette behind Daniel blended into the shadows cast by shelving. Only after contrast adjustments and pixel isolation did the second figure become distinguishable. The case shifted from a presumed financial exploitation scenario to premeditated confrontation. Rebecca Morales was arrested on November 3, 2024, and charged with second-degree murder and evidence tampering. In pretrial motions, her defense argued that the reflection analysis was speculative and that the blood traces in the vehicle could have resulted from secondary transfer. They suggested Daniel may have suffered an accidental fall inside the garage, and Rebecca's presence in the area that evening was coincidental. But the timeline remained consistent. The disposable phone, the early garage access, the draft email, the glove fibers, the enhanced reflection, and the small pause at 10:42:52 seconds when Daniel stood at the garage entrance and looked toward the street as if someone might be there. What investigators missed at first was not a lack of evidence. It was the assumption that the camera had shown them everything. It had not. It showed only what its angle allowed. And the truth was standing just outside of it.
Rebecca Morales' trial began on May 12, 2025, in the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas in Columbus. Prosecutors did not argue that the crime was impulsive. They argued it was controlled. They laid out the timeline in measured sequence: the financial transfer on August 28, the civil court documents Daniel downloaded and printed, the deleted phone note about the garage code, the prepaid call, the early garage access, the draft email warning him not to go to police, the enhanced reflection, the blood in the trunk. The defense focused on doubt. They questioned the reliability of digital reconstruction. They argued that reflections can distort shapes and create illusions. They emphasized that no eyewitness placed Rebecca physically inside the garage at 10:42 p.m. They suggested Daniel may have confronted someone else, an unknown third party, about financial matters. But the prosecution returned repeatedly to one detail: the camera angle. Jurors were shown the original footage first, then the enhanced version, frame by frame. The moment the garage door rises, the half-second silhouette, the mirrored posture lagging behind Daniel's movement. They were shown the corrupted thumbnail image extracted from Daniel's phone cache, enlarged, stabilized, the faint outline of a second person positioned just beyond the camera's direct view. Forensic analysts testified about blood pattern analysis, explaining why the impact occurred near the threshold, not deep inside the garage, why the wipe marks were narrow, why the body placement suggested repositioning rather than collapse. After 9 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on both counts, second-degree murder and evidence tampering. Rebecca Morales was sentenced to 22 years to life.
In her final statement before sentencing, she did not admit guilt. She said only that things escalated. Daniel Harper's sister spoke afterward. She described him not as a victim, but as someone who tried to correct a mistake, someone who discovered the truth and chose to confront it directly. The Rose Hill Avenue home was sold in late 2025. The new owners removed the garage-mounted security camera during renovations, but the footage remains archived in evidence. When you watch it now, knowing what investigators eventually learned, the ordinary details shift. The way Daniel pauses beside the SUV, the glance toward the street, the brief hesitation before stepping fully inside. At first viewing, it appears routine. On second viewing, it appears cautious. The garage door begins to rise at 10:42:48 p.m. For less than 1 second, the reflection reveals what the direct lens cannot: a figure already waiting. The unblinking camera did not move. It did not warn him. It did not intervene. It recorded exactly what its angle allowed, and nothing more. Everyone thought he was the victim, and he was, but he was not unaware. He had already discovered the truth about the person standing in the blind spot. The tragedy was not that the camera failed. It was that its perspective was incomplete. September 18, 2024, 10:42 p.m. Eastmoor neighborhood, Columbus, Ohio. A man returns home. A garage door rises. A silhouette waits in the angle no one thinks to check. This is never seen again.